So let's talk about the first official rules previewed for the Guard by Games Workshop, and talk about the new and intriguing regiment system for the Astra Militarum. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're talking Guard once more. It's been a pretty busy weekend for them, with a whole clutch of new plastic models revealed the other day, including that big new army set, and then another potential sighting of the new Rogue or Dawn tank from their artwork. What was kind of conspicuously lacking from the preview in a major way though was the cover of the new Codex, though interestingly enough from the shot of the back of the army set that they revealed we can see a picture of it. This looks like it'll be the limited edition cover for the Codex for the army. It looks like we've got some chap riding a horse, potentially either a new Rough Rider or Solo Macarius, yet to be unveiled. Hopefully they won't leave us hanging too long on that front at least. That didn't stop them talking through a fair few rules from the Codex though, including most notably the new regiment system, and it does sound like it's going to be a bit of a departure from the way that most armies work in 40k, with a new redesigned system. So basically what Games Workshop have said is that you can mix different regiments within the same army, and rather than literally be forced to choose a rule depending on whether your guys have the appearance of Death Corps of Krieg or Cadians for example, you get to pick a regimental doctrine for the entire army, and then regardless of whether your models have the appearance of Catachans or Cadians, they all use that one unified set of rules. I think it is perhaps a pretty helpful idea, say for example representing that different regiments might choose to fight in very different ways. Even if say they were all nominally Cadian regiments, you might get some that really specialise in stealth warfare, or be renowned for their bravery or something. It also sort of perhaps represents the kind of ad hoc nature of the Imperial Guard. Often regiments are drawn from multiple different worlds, and it means that say if it made sense in your lore to have some of your army Cadian and some Catachan or Kriegsmen for example, you could fill them all under one unified flag and not be penalised as a result. It doesn't sound like you do things squad by squad, it does still sound like it's a whole army decision, the same way as chapter tactics or Chaos Legion traits are for example. And I feel like the main motivation with Games Workshop for this is that unlike, say, Space Marines, where the only real difference between a lot of the chapters might be the colour paint that they're painted in, for Guard models they actually have physical differences between the models. Say for example, you could look at a model and decide whether or not it's a Cadian, Catachan or Kriegsman, and basically say that you're locked into using that regimental trait, as your army is quite clearly from that one place. I think it's maybe also a nod to the fact that they don't sell most of the regiments at the moment. Maybe they'll come out with some other kits at some time or another, but it seems a bit weird to say be giving very specific regimental rules to perhaps Talon or Mordians when they haven't made the models in ages. It just doesn't really seem very cohesive from their point of view. To be fair, even at the moment I think people were at least fairly understanding of this. Say for example you might have Cadian models, but say in my lore that they use the Vostroyan rules because that's the way that they would fight, and I feel like not many people would have ever taken issue with that. It does look like it's a bit of a strange system compared with the rest of 40k though, as it does throw up a few issues, such as what happens to the unique warlord traits, relics and stratagems. Are they going to be a thing? And does that mean say Guard might get some expanded options on those if you don't have any regiment locked options? I guess those questions will remain till later, but they have given us a fairly nice and straightforward preview of how a couple of the doctrines work, and they happen to be the ones for the Death Corps of Krieg and the Mordians. Apparently each regiment gets to combine two different doctrines they feel represents them the best, or I guess might have the most powerful rules if you're trying to optimise lists, and at least for the ones that they've shown off so far, both of these appear to be very infantry based. I guess it remains to be seen whether or not the tanks will have anything to stand out from one army to the next. In any case, for the two that we've got previewed, the Krieg one is Cult of Sacrifice. First up, units with this doctrine get the Cult of Sacrifice keyword. That looks like it could be used to key off certain stratagems and things. Perhaps a fights or shoots in death one could be kind of appropriate. From those leaked rules that we had a while back, it looks like the keyword might actually enhance a stratagem that's available to everyone, rather than just allow a stratagem that you wouldn't be able to use normally. So maybe there might be one that allows models to shoot in death perhaps, and Cult of Sacrifice might make it happen on a 3+ rather than a 4+ for example. Something of that nature seems kind of plausible. Besides that though, the main benefit is that each time a model with a doctrine makes an attack, if the model's unit is below its starting strength when it was selected to shoot or fight, you get to add 1 to the attack's hit roll. As benefits go, I'd say it's a bit mediocre really. A lot of the time in 40k, units either tend to be alive or just dead completely. It might be a little bit more situational that this happens to trigger, but I guess whenever it does happen it will feel very nice indeed. Could be quite useful for a few surviving special weapons to hit extra hard I suppose, and it seems like it could be potentially really quite interesting for conscripts as well, presuming they're even a thing in the new Guard Codex. Big units like that might have a bit more survivability and a bit more chance of being shot but not fully killed. Overall, I guess it's probably not going to be one of the stronger ones unless the rest are very underwhelming or the stratagem is dead good, but it doesn't exactly seem like one that would hurt you. Otherwise, there's a reimagined one for Parade Drill, which is the new Mordian style one. This one's quite a specific one and built around lasguns. If your squad remains stationary, then your lasguns become heavy 2 rather than presumably rapid fire 1. It also applies to hotshot lasguns, say for maybe the new Kasrkin or the Militarum Tempestus, but I must admit I do question how good this is going to be just a little bit. Remaining stationary in 40k is usually going to be quite a big trade-off. You're not going to be able to get line of sight on what you need to or get towards objectives, and this does kind of depend on lasguns in themselves being strong enough to be a credible damage threat and not just something that you want to slog up towards the enemy and screen them out and stuff. I think this one just looks very dependent on whether or not mass las fire is going to be one of the strongest things in the new codex. Certainly could be, but we'll have to wait and see just how powerful lasguns are and what sort of buffs they can get. Otherwise, I would say that the existence of this maybe doesn't look very optimistic for the survival of first rank fire, second rank fire in its current form. That one doubles the shot of the lasguns, kind of similar to this. I guess it's not impossible, it could be something like just add 1 to the number of las shots or something, and maybe that could make this one a bit more interesting. Overall, it looks like the system is kind of similar to the current custom regiment system. Looks like that one's just going a bit more generalised and perhaps a bit more in-depth. I can't help but think that this sort of thing might just lend itself to having just 1 or 2 really quite strong picks and most of the rest a bit overlooked, but I guess we'll have to wait and see on that front. Moving on, they did give us a few more handy teasers about some of the other units as well. First up, one of the interesting things about the new Kasrkin is that apparently as the Stormtroopers they get to pick another regimental rule on top of the rest, so it sounds like they get the standard 2 that the rest of your army will be getting, and they also get another one that would suit their own ends. Seems like it could be kind of helpful to them on paper. If they could try and pick something that would be handy for delivering special weapons or opening fire with hotshot lasguns, that would be pretty good. It doesn't really seem to me though that either of the 2 that they'd previewed will be enormously helpful. Generally they're going to be wanting to move due to the short range of their weapons, and the Cult of Sacrifice thing wouldn't trigger on the first turn that they drop or anything, also making it seem a little bit unhelpful. Perhaps just a little bit similar to the old Veteran Doctrines type rules that they had in previous editions of the Codex, but how meaningful it actually is might depend on how strong the Doctrines rules are in the first place, and whether or not a third pick will really be that great. At this point my guess would probably be that the Scions get a similar sort of treatment to the Kasrkin. The vast majority of their gear and the way that they'd operate would be the same. If Cadian shock troops are getting their own datasheet away from the infantry squad though, it seems at least fairly likely that Kasrkin might as well though. Speaking of which, they did talk about a couple of other things for the new units. First up, for the field ordnance batteries, these are the bigger and badder heavy weapon teams with better armament. They didn't tell us loads, but they did say that the heavy las cannon would deal with tanks better, the Malice rockets will be great against infantry, and the Bombast field gun will be a bit more general purpose and also ignore line of sight. I must admit, if both of those are the case though, I'm not desperately optimistic for it being enormously efficient damage-wise. General purpose ignores line of sight shooting is generally something that you have to pay a big premium for in 40k. Finally, while quite a lot of these things tally quite well with the previous rumours that we had, it does sound like they've debunked one rather concerning one, saying that you might not be able to add on standard heavy weapon teams to infantry squads anymore. On the stream they specifically said that you could add on a heavy weapon team to a 10-man infantry squad, so it seems that they're still very much usable in that capacity, and it actually gives you a more intriguing question as to whether or not you might be able to field them with an extra heavy weapon squad in addition, as opposed to the more normal way at the moment of replacing 2 infantrymen. At least from a models and kits perspective, it might make a bit of sense to change to a 10-man squad plus or minus a heavy weapon team, and GW have seemed to be basing quite a lot of their model rules decisions around the kits at the moment. It still could be the standard swap out 2 thing, but either way it's quite good that they can still be taken in the infantry units. That would have stomped on quite a lot of tradition. Finally, I did find it quite interesting that Cadian shock troops are now going to be a distinct unit, and seeing as basically regiments aren't really a thing anymore, it does mean that every single regiment will be able to field them, so you're not feeling bad if you're not fielding Cadians. I guess even if you did want to collect, say, an entire Death Korps Krieg army with entirely models of their aesthetic, you could still potentially field the unit, maybe just have one squad painted differently and armed appropriately. It wouldn't seem too hard to me to explain that one unit is the shock troops, and the rest are the standard battle line infantry squads. They weren't too specific on the details, but apparently they'll have more special weapon options than the standard infantry unit, and maybe it'll be them that have that similar set of options to the Traitor Guardsman squad, and get to field 3 different special weapons, 1 of each type. Apparently they do get some other special rule that helps them function as shock troops a bit better. Really not too sure what that could be, to be honest. Maybe a buff to damage up close, or something to help out their movement a bit perhaps. Pretty intriguing stuff though. It sounds like alongside infantry squads you might be able to field shock troops as a different alternative for troops for the guard. So anyway, it's pretty nice to have some actual official rules previews for once. Guard players certainly have waited long enough for their Codex. Hopefully this will get Guard back into the fight in 9th edition. I'll certainly be looking forward to any more Guard model or rules previews myself, so feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to keep up with Games Workshop's news and releases. I'll most certainly be reviewing the Codex in full once it's out as well. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to quickly mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and that's how I can afford to keep on making quite so many videos like this quite so often. If you are enjoying a lot, then any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, an absolutely massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.